Hello, everyone, and welcome to session IC 59, titled AAC for the ATP, part of the RESNA Track here at ISS. My name is Vince. I'll be moderating today's session, and I'll provide the CU code at the end via the chat box, and I'll also get online and say it so everybody can hear me as well. Before we get started, please remember to mute yourself. Questions can be asked through the chat feature and will be addressed throughout the session. I'll go ahead and turn it over to our speaker, Beth Speaker-Christensen. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Speaker-Christensen. No, it's not a typo. That's my name. Some of you might know me. I know I have friends through ISS. I am a member of ASHA and RESNA. I am on the professional standards board of RESNA right now. Was part of the item writing workshop to help create the exam. I am the membership chair of USAC, which is the United States Society of Augmentative and Alternate Communication, which is the US chapter of ISAC. I have had every job under the sun between nursing homes, clinics, hospitals, schools, and other contracted services. And I now have a private practice in the Chicagoland area for individuals who use augmentative and alternate communication. I would like to have special thanks for my friends Sayre Bass-Ruzinski and Dina Bradshaw, both of whom usually do this presentation with me or for me. We've done this at a number of different conferences, and these ladies are my co-presenters, my confidants, and my co-conspirators. So just wanted to put their names out there. As far as disclosures, I don't have any financial disclosures except that I was given access to this ISS this year. So no financial disclosures. I have no financial relationship with any of the tech or the companies that I'll be speaking about today. So these are some of the goals that I hope to achieve. We're going to be able to talk about the images that are used in many of the different systems. You'll be able to talk about the Fitzgerald key or the modified Fitzgerald key. We'll talk about access methods for accessing AAC. We're going to talk about elements that are available in different mainstream communication programs, and we're going to talk about queuing and prompting and the hierarchy that we use. So, survey of the room. Because we're virtual, usually when we're at the session, we ask everybody to raise their hands, but I'm assuming that I've got some OTs, some PTs, parents, vendors, assistants, educators. Everybody's here, I hope. Maybe some engineers. Hope it's everybody, and I hope that what this session what I'm hoping to gain through this session is an idea of collaboration. We all need to come together to help make these decisions on which tech we're going to use and understand the input that is so valuable from each of the different disciplines that work with the clients of which we serve. So moving right along. So the process of getting a device. First, we have to assume potential. We look at our kids, our clients, the people that we work with, and we determine that I'll bet they could do this. Why can't they do this? Everybody can do this. There are no prerequisites for using AAC. The only prerequisite is breathing. So it's our jobs to find out what in fact is going to work best for whomever needs it. The next step is the evaluation process. You've heard of SET frameworks, you've heard of domain meetings, you've heard of different assessment tools that are available. We go through any and all of that to determine the best way to match the features to the client. What do they need and what's going to work best? And finally, we have to finish up with training and intervention. Once we have the technology there, we need to train those around to use it so that they feel comfortable prompting and modeling and teaching. And that's everybody. That's the parents, that's the teachers aides, the grandparents, whomever is around in order to get the biggest bang for our buck. So our access to language, as I said before, the multidisciplinary team approach is best. Everyone has something to contribute. What can the client see or perceive or hear? How is their fine motor control for access? How is their gross motor control for positioning and transportation? I, as a speech therapist, don't have these specialty areas of study. I didn't go through and take classes on vision. I didn't take classes on gross motor control. However, I've been working in this field for a really long time, and I have a lot of knowledge in the area, but it's really good when I go to my cohorts and I say, listen, you know, PT, tell me about this odd positioning that we've got this person in, and how can I get the device to them so that they can communicate with me. Once we've considered all those things, the access to the device, then we start looking at factors like the operational access to the communication, the linguistic goals that they might be working towards. How are they going to use it socially, and what strategies do they need to be effective? So as speech therapists, we're coming from a very specific place. We use all the stuff that we learned in school, which I know OTs and PTs didn't take these classes. Bloom's taxonomy, the understanding of language, Brown's morphemes, the parts, the word endings, the parts of speech that are available in many devices in order to make a complete thought, for tenses, for plurals, for ing endings. Well, I'm sure you've heard about core versus fringe words, very important concepts of the words that we use. Here's a secret, we need them both. We need to understand that this is just language therapy. So for new speech therapists who are just getting started, AAC therapy is language therapy. And so we have to follow developmental models. We have to meet the person where they're at. We need to make sure that they're able and that SNUG is available. SNUG is novel utterance generating. So being able to create spontaneous novel utterance generating, say what they want to say, when they want to say it, to whom they want to say it. Different language. Is the client just nonverbal, or do they have a typical language development or atypical? They may also have problems with understanding or processing language beyond just being nonverbal. So they may not understand everything that we're saying, but we still need to meet them where they're at. And language development takes time. It took you guys a long time to learn language, and it's going to take our device users even longer. But two of the resources that we like to share with the new SLPs is ASHA 12 and the ISAC and USAC groups. So there's lots of choices of things that we can use in order to access language for people who are nonverbal or minimally verbal. We've got all these high-tech devices. You'll see that there's PRC devices from the Prenke-Romic company. There's Tobii Dynavox. There's Speak for Yourself. There's apps. There's Gateway and Grid software. There's the Nova Chats through Saltillo. Lots of different choices for high-tech options. There are more choices for low-tech and non-tech, or less tech, light tech. We've got a pain chart that you might have used in the hospital. We've got applications and low-tech boards. We've got mid-tech devices like the GoTalk 20 Plus, which you can program your voice in there to say all those fun things you want to say. If any of you are familiar with Stephen Hawking, you know that board on the bottom is an E-Tran board, and he used his eyes to pick the square and the color and the item in which, so that he could spell out his messages at first from the theory of everything. We've got a board up there from the word power files that Nancy Inman created, the one with all of the pictures. There's a little step, or a step-by-step communicator, where we can program up to 2 minutes of material into that, and we could have steps. First you do this, then you do that, or we could read stories. I don't know if you remember the show that was on called Speechless. JJ was the son who was nonverbal, and he had a laser light on his glasses, and he was able to point to the item that he wanted. And on the very bottom, we've got some 3D icons that are used to work with those with visual impairments sometimes. So you might have said more than once when working with one of your clients, why did we choose this piece of tech? Well, this is what we tell the non-SLPs or the new SLPs. We start at the zone of proximal development, meaning that wherever they're at physically, motorically, cognitively, with their language skills. We have to start with where they are and work within that area, building towards growth and learning. A professional ask really quick, if you do see a system that you're unfamiliar with, or you think you've got an idea to make a change, make sure you don't change the language without talking to someone on the team. My friend Sayard had a client that she was working with, and one of the other professionals on the team wanted to have quicker access to the toys or sensory choices that the child had. So put a link on a button in the device instead of the not button. And what we figured out is now this child can't negate any comment, can't say I don't like, can't say I don't want, can't say I don't need, instead can only go to the toys and choices. So knowing that there's a lot of decisions made, and people much smarter than I am created these systems with a lot of linguistic research and counting of utterances. There can be a significant learning curve to all of these devices, especially those with more complex needs. So you've got to figure out that there's the language component, obviously. Then you add in the motor control or fine motor, gross motor control. The learning in general, how did we learn it? There's significant learning for those that are communication partners who need to know how to prompt, how to use the devices. So be kind to yourselves and to everyone else on the team, because this is not an easy process. Be a team player. Reach out and learn about your client and why decisions were made. You know, oftentimes a decision is made in preschool and the child gets to kindergarten and the team goes, we don't like that one, we're going to use something different. Well, there's a reason why it was chosen in kindergarten or preschool. Let's keep going and see if we can work together to collaborate and build on what the student or client already knows. We have to consider how long it takes before an infant begins to speak. We were all almost 1 year old before we started talking, but we were engaged in language, we were immersed in language all that time before we started using those words ourselves. So again, be kind to those who are using the systems and understand that it's a really long process. So it's not going to be fast. One of the main things that we have to consider when looking at devices is real estate. How many buttons can we access? With that real estate, we have to pick which words are going to give us the most bang for our buck. So this is when we start talking about core versus fringe. Core words are the 350 to 500 words that we use 80% of the time. So every day, if I wrote down every word that I'm saying or every word that you say, the core words would make up 80% of what I'm saying. The fringe words are all those extra ones. Now, for me, in my personal core, Starbucks is in there. Someone else might have Starbucks in their fringe or their extra fringe. It's way out there. They don't need access to that right away. But Starbucks needs to be on the front page or really close to the front page of what I would need to access. We have to consider navigation. How many levels or pages or hits or contacts do we have to have in order for our clients to get to the words that they're the target that they're trying to hit? What are their skills? What are their strengths and their areas of need? Are they a typical or an atypical language learner? Do they already have some skills where they know how switches work? They know that this is a really reliable switch placement. And typically in that real estate, the items, the words are represented by pictures, because most of the kids that get started with AAC are not yet readers. And so obviously, if you were working with an adult who already knew how to read, a word-based system might be best. So along with the language, we've got lots of different representations on how those pictures can be viewed. We've got realistic pictures. An orange looks like an orange. We've got visual scenes where you've got a drawn image of the bedroom. So it might be that if I touch the bed, it says I'm tired. Or if I touch the closet, it might open up another page that has options for clothing that I might want to wear today. And on the lower corner, we've also got a real picture of the kitchen. For those with some cognitive difficulties, they may need an actual photo of their kitchen to know that this is where we keep the silverware, this is where the phone is located, this is the microwave, this is where I warm up my dinner. So the actual picture could be used dependent on the client's needs. So now we get into the crazy line drawings. There are line drawings that we're familiar with, I'm sure, symbol sticks and PCS symbols or the board maker pictures. Without the words up above, I challenge you to tell me what each of these pictures represent. They could represent I, me, they could be want, it could, I don't even actually remember because I've used certain systems so long and the words are above them that I take that for granted. But what's important to understand is when you see a system with the pictures and you say, well, the pictures have to be this certain way, please understand that the kids don't have that preconceived knowledge that we have, or those concepts that we've learned throughout our lives to understand the categorization, the words that are there, the representation. Why does it represent that? And so these are some of the line drawings. Some of the systems have multiple meaning pictures, kind of like hieroglyphics. So they're MinSpeak pictures, Unity pictures, or Pixons created by Gail Van Tatenhove. These pictures were meant to be hieroglyphics that represent concepts of language. So they don't just represent a noun, a verb, or an adjective. They might represent a series of words that are all related to a concept that would have nouns, verbs, prepositions, everything tagged to that one idea. So that's why those crazy pictures exist, because the person who created it, Bruce Baker, the linguist, decided that he would get more bang for his buck by linking them in this manner. I've left jobs over these pictures, but they're very important. So how much do pictures matter? I want to tell you a story. I worked at a school a long time ago, and one of the teacher's aides or program assistants was just having fits over why the cookie cutters meant make. Why then would that same button represent off? And I said, well, you see, they represent holidays, and the holidays, you get a day off on a holiday, so the preposition that goes with that. And she said, that's just stupid. That makes no sense to me. I hate it. And we talked about this. I worked at that school for over 7 years, and we talked about it over and over. And even to this day, we're friends. And she'll go, oh, the cookie cutters. Hate the cookie cutters. Well, in that same conversation, one of the teachers turned around. It was Katie Alling. She turned around and she said, look, it could be a board full of drag queens. And as long as the pictures stay in the same spot, it doesn't matter what the pictures are. I mean, it matters for representation for those of us who are teaching the language. But overall, the pictures don't matter. Once we get going, we just create the motor plans, we touch the locations that we're familiar with, and some of us use some of the visual information as a prompt, but a lot of times we just hit the button. If I moved the messaging app on your phone to another spot, you'd be furious, but you just go to it. You're not looking at what the app image looks like. So for instance, Tootsie, he had a little too much to drink in the Tootsie movie. Dustin Hoffman got a little tipsy, so we chose drink for that one. On the bottom row, you've got RuPaul as want. Well, that's the drag queen I'd want to be. And up in the corner, you've got Dame Edna, and on the bottom corner, you've got Mrs. Doubtfire. So those pictures were chosen for a reason to represent these concepts, but it could be anything. It could be anything. So don't get caught up on the pictures. Start understanding what the pictures represent and understand why those pictures were created. The pictures that we use, whether they're board maker pictures, Pixons, MinSpeak symbols, the Alling board with the drag queens, we're actually hoping to see how far around the world we can get this one to go. But it doesn't matter. Whichever images you're using, our students are going to figure out the imagery. They're going to figure out the location of the icon. If they want to say drink or eat, they're going to find that button repeatedly because it's important. And so that's where we're going with the Alling board. It's a good time, but we have to create those representations so that we understand why they're being used. So one of our objectives was to talk about the Fitzgerald key or the modified Fitzgerald key. So research was done long ago, before my time, to determine that if we color-coded the buttons, we might be able to draw people to certain parts of speech. And you're going to find different color codes with different systems, but most of the mainstream systems that we use today use what's called a modified Fitzgerald key. So the pronouns are yellow, the verbs are green, the nouns are orange, etc. So this might help our learners with, we say, oh, you know what, we need more green words in there. Let's look at the green ones. It might also help adults when we look at which parts of speech the students or the clients are using to understand that we need more of another different kind of color. We need more color in our language to make sure that they're using effective language so that they can spontaneously generate novel utterances. And so when you look at these systems, it might help you to understand what words the client is using. I often tell people that it's more of a teaching tool for the communicative partners than it is for the device users. There was research done by Dave McNaughton and Judith Light at the RERC for AAC, and they determined that the color coding did not truly affect, and now we can spin our research whichever way we want, but we can determine that we're not sure that it gives enough visual input to really make a difference on how kids move through their devices, but it's there for a reason, and it's a good reason. All right, so let's work it out together. When I'm in a conference, my friend Sayard says, okay, somebody, I need a volunteer, raise your hand. I'm not going to do that. When we see these different items, we know what they are. It's a wheelchair, a container of Play-Doh, and a cookie. What's important to remember about these things is we don't just name them. We don't just walk through life and say window, table, chair, shirt, shoes, pizza, Starbucks, although I do say Starbucks a lot. We have to talk about with kids descriptive language in order to decide how we use these things. What can we do with these things? If this picture was not on my device, how would I explain that to the person that I need it, right? I might talk about how I sit in my chair, or I want out of my chair, or a certain part of my chair hurts me. We might talk about I need my chair because we're going to go to the zoo and we're going to be going long distances. If we're playing Play-Doh, we might talk about what color I want. We might talk about what we can do with it. And so just by naming the items, we only have one thing we can say, the name of it. By describing the item and how we use it, why we need them, if we don't want it. I like the smell of Play-Doh, but I don't like it in my house because it's messy. So with all of those things, we'd like you to consider that things are not just nouns. Language is not nouns. We don't just noun. So moving on, we talked about in the goals that we were going to talk about different access methods in getting to our communication systems. As you can see, the disability is not the problem. The accessibility is the problem. I'm sure because you guys are part of ISS, you understand that. Access for everything is so important. And what we find in AAC is there is direct access and indirect access. But this is where collaboration is most important because access has so many different facets. We've got motor control, we've got sensory input, we've got cognitive input, we've got input on top of input. It's everywhere. So we have to take all of these things into account when determining what system we're going to use. So the picture in the middle, that's my friend Dan. His dad put a belt on his head and wrapped this piece of metal around. He's got his Apple Pen on the end. He's using direct access. He's using that pointer to touch the button, the word that he wants to activate. We can use our fingers. We can use our eyes. All of those are considered direct access. We're touching the word that we want to say. The advantages of these systems are that it's faster, but as a disadvantage is it requires a lot of focus and control, and it can lead to fatigue. My friend Danny gets so excited to communicate that sometimes he can't get the Apple Pen to the spot where he wants to hit the button, and he gets frustrated. And after he's been talking to me for an hour, he is sweating buckets because that's how he's chosen to communicate. He does have other ways and other systems and other access methods, but this is his preferred communication. And so he has to work really hard to get that message across. There's also indirect access. Again, you probably know a lot of this. I'm hoping that I'm not giving you too much old information. I hope some of it is new. But when we use a joystick, we have to maneuver through all of the choices to get to the ones we want. The same step-by-step with levels, we have to navigate through different messages to get to the one we want to say. The neuro node can be used in order to access the choices that are there. And sip and puff. So what you could do is get your mouse to a certain spot or get your access to a certain spot, activate the sip and puff in order to drive maybe the cursor to the word that you're looking for. So the advantages to this, to indirect access, is that it allows those with motor involvement to control the timing and the degree of how quickly they're going to get to their location. So a lot of times we find that individuals say that it's just so slow to create a message with switches. It's just so slow to go through to switch access. But in that sense, my friend Ryan can hit his chooser switch to go through the choices that he hears. He's listening to the auditory prompts. When he hears the one that he wants, he can hit with his head switch in order to make his choice. Without that, he has cerebral palsy, quadriplegic cerebral palsy, along with some hemiparesis that is more involving his right side. So everything he's doing is to the left. He's got cortical visual impairment. He's using auditory prompts. There's a lot of stuff that has to come together at just the right moment in order for Ryan to access. So although it's slower, it has some really nice benefits as far as accuracy and giving the individual the control over the communication. So access, we know that a lot of the high-tech stuff is great, but we don't always have access to our high-tech devices. So we have to make sure we have another backup. Do we use an app that kind of mirrors what they have on their high-tech device? Do we use a paper board? We have to have something available if the battery dies, if the power goes out, if the phone or device ends up in the pool. It has to spend a lot of time in that rice. What if you lived in Texas and you were there when the power went out with the grid and you didn't have access to charging your system because you didn't have a backup generator? We have to make sure that everyone has some type of backup. The USAC here in the United States has a team of people that work on emergency preparedness and availability of technology for when there is a disaster. They've been in Kentucky for the tornadoes. They've gone to Texas when the power went out, and they've been all over the world in helping individuals to have access to the technology that they need or backup technology that they can use temporarily to get them through until their system is available. We also need to make sure that the mounting equipment is available or options are available if they're not in their wheelchair in the optimal position or they're not in that spot. I have a client that loves to be in his Papasan chair. Well, we have to use a floor stand to get the device up over his head so that he can see it and access it and make it go. So again, access backups are the most important. So there are low and no tech options for communication. Things that don't require batteries, things that you might need in a different situation. What we encourage that you continue to use important words when you only have certain options. Again, we have to talk about real estate. If you're using the quarterback armband, you only have 6 buttons. You better have 6 good buttons. So don't waste it on things that someone can say non-verbally. You might put a core board on a kickboard in the pool, and that might start the communication that you need. If you're in a PT session, you might put yes/no bands on either side so that as we're working on ambulation, we can also have access really quickly to, are you okay? Does that hurt? Can we keep going? Our individuals can say yes or no in a different way, because it's my rule for everything is one hard thing at a time. So these are some of the options that we have available, little flip books where you can put different options in. I know the Lance Armstrong rubber armbands or whatever, those you can have printed with messages that you want. We had a client or a student that we worked with at a school whose mom was really an amazing seamstress, and she had the client information embroidered on the back of all of his shirts so that in an emergency, if he couldn't tell them who he was and what his telephone number was, his shirt gave that information. So this is, I usually say this is a room full of creative makers, but this is a Zoom full of creative makers. What do you do in order to get the word and the language to your clients while you're doing your sessions, while you're doing your therapy, or while you're modifying a chair or whatever? High tech is not the answer in every situation, that's for sure. So here we go. When it comes to mainstream AAC, right now there's kind of 3 main companies that provide the most devices out there. PRC, or the Prent Curomic Company, Saltillo, who is the sister company to PRC, and it's now PRC Saltillo, and Tobii Dynavox. There are many, many, many others, but what you'll see is the devices have different sizes, different shapes, different weights, different access methods, different language systems. The PRC devices offer MinSpeak, semantic compaction. They do offer some scenes. In the PRC devices, you can also get the word power files, and you can get the essence and dialogue, I think it is the new one. With Saltillo, you can get some of the pages that were created for the Saltillo system, but you can also get the word power files. With Tobii Dynavox, you can also get word power files, but you get the PCS symbols with BoardMaker. You get the BoardMaker scenes. You get Snap plus Core, Snap Core. I forget what they're calling it now. The disadvantages. For the PRC devices, the non-users tend to have difficulty with some of those hieroglyphics. Those pictures on the front end are not obvious. You have to kind of start to learn the patterns. So we've had some discussions about the difficulty that's there. With Saltillo, some of the vocabulary and some of the files as you move through between different page sets, there's not consistency on where the clear button is, or where the home button is, or where the go back button is. And so as you move through, there's some difficulty with consistency of location. And on top of that, some of the things that we need to allow our users to get to, if you don't have the word on the first page, there's some verbs that would need to be listed phonemically. So we have to go to our K words to hit K, to hit, or actions A to Z to hit K, to hit KISS. And with Tobii Dynavox, they've had many, many systems throughout the time that I've been in practice, and they tend to evolve their language systems and some of their page sets, and then what happens is we have difficulty in making sure that they still support their older software and hardware in order to move forward with the clients that obtained those devices. All right, I'm taking a breath. Moderators, any questions so far? I'll wait for a yes or no. Okay, I guess I'll move right along. I didn't get a yes, so. Other mainstream AAC, Jabla is a, I think they're out of Sweden or Norway. They are creating page sets that have pod. I know GridPad might also be working on pod. The Prox Talker is a MigTech device that is also working on lots of different options. It has the keys that you can program with language on each of the tiles. So you kind of get a blend between a picture exchange and a voice output device. GridPad has robust options for adults with acquired disabilities, which you would find in all of this tech that I'm talking about. They go from birth to death, but again, these are just more of the choices. All right. So on top of that, you may have also noticed there are lots of app-based systems that are available. Again, we use all of those same evaluation tools or trials in order to determine the best app to use with our clients. I get discouraged when I see on the Facebook groups someone who says, well, what's the best free app I can get? What you'll find is you tend to get what you pay for. So if you want robust language with some semblance of support from the people, the developers, you need to get the really fancy apps. And yes, they're expensive, but there are ways to obtain them with lesser costs. And if you don't have insurance funding, it could be that getting an app with a case and an iPad that might be refurbished or new is still the most cost-effective way to use language in a device. But on top of that, you remember you have to take into account the access. And so a lot of times with the iPads and the iOS stuff, it's difficult for our complex communicators that have switches or have different access with eye gaze or head pointers. Some of the apps are incorporating that into their programs, so that helps. But this is just a short list of the ones that are available, and there are more being invented as we speak. I know that there was a young man whose sister needed communication I forget if he was in junior high or high school, but he was able to code an app. He said these other ones were way too expensive and fancy, and everyone should have access to language. And I agree. Okay, so moving through, you've got the device. The device shows up. It's on the chair, or it's on the desk, or it's in front of the person, and now it's time to use it. How can you understand the prompting hierarchy that's used? Each communicator has their own level of proficiency and speed, so we have to give them time to try to communicate. The rule in our field is to go from less to more prompting, least to most. So the moment you take the time to prompt, you've taken the turn away from the device user. So really be thoughtful about when you're prompting, how quickly you prompt. Take a break and see what they do. As they're learning the device, it's okay to make mistakes because that's how we learn. They might accidentally hit a button that's next to the one that they meant to get, and then they remember that that's a word that they might want to use on another day. So there's lots of mistakes that we learn from, but if we're too quick to prompt, we're not doing them a service. So on top of that, the speech therapy world has also decided that we're getting away from physical prompting. We don't want to use hand-over-hand prompting because we take away the individual's autonomy. It's more important to use, if you have to use physical touch, to use a hand underhand so that the client can see what it is, the word that it is that they're touching. But hand over hand and forcing the hand to a button is not the way to do it. We want to get engagement. We want to get interaction. We want to get turn taking. But with all of this, we just want you to try. Don't be afraid to wait. It's not a race. We don't have to get there fast. Just go ahead and try and see what you can get from those that you're working with. So here's some professional asks. When working with PWU-AACs, I love that acronym, people who use AAC, you're not an expert. You may know that device up and down. I'm not an expert either. I'm someone who specializes in the area of AAC, but we leave the expertise to the people who use the devices. I don't use it every day, all day. I don't use the same system all day, every day. So it's not my place to say that I'm the best at this. Don't be afraid to let the person know about your familiarity with the system or how their customized vocabulary has been inputted, because you don't know where they are. Tell them and have them show you, have them encourage or teach you where the stuff is. It's a great way to get them sharing their device with you. Each person who uses a device is different. Always ask if you can touch their device for prompting. You may have to have your own system because they might not like it when you touch their system. It's also nice to ask if you can read their screen over their shoulder, if you should be on that side of the screen. They're just talking to you like people. So when it comes to those device users, make sure that you ask, because everybody's different. I have lots of people who don't mind if I read the screen because my hearing isn't always great, but it's up to some people it matters. So these are some of the professional asks that we have. You always, as you may know, we always want to directly speak to the person who uses AAC. If a parent or caregiver is there, that's great, but we still address the person. Communication is obviously going to take longer. There was research that said that some device users are only able to get to 8 to 10 words a minute, as opposed to adult speakers who can speak 100 up to 150 words a minute or more. I know I'm pretty quick. I haven't done a rate, but I know I'm probably better than 150. So depending on their access, the process should be even slower. If they're a 2-switch scanner and they have to go through the program to get to that word they want to say, it's going to take a long time. And so it's kind to wait for the answer. And it's also nice to let them have the time to ask you questions as well. We're a really quick society who has to be places, but we need to be kind and share the time. You may need to have a backup available, something that you can model on. But how do you communicate with your verbal clients? What do you do with people who can talk? We want to do about the same. We just, need to modify that a little bit, but not much should change. Okay, so what you may be asking is, how do I incorporate AAC into my session? Whether you're an OT or a PT, and whether it's ABA, mobility training for those with vision difficulties. I find a lot that the conundrum is figuring out how to use the AAC in a PT session, or how to use the AAC in swim class or in the classroom. How are we going to incorporate it? We have to offer a lot of choices, right? So this is a good point in which you could have a choice board, right? What sensory stuff might we need to maintain regulation in an OT session or in the classroom? What choices, if we give a kid a choice of which activity to do first, we might get better compliance. They might be more engaged in the activity because they chose it. It's really important in PT and OT and in the classroom or in some club to connect movement and language. There's research that shows that gross motor movements bring out a lot of language. In addition, giving choices will reduce behaviors. It'll allow the client to self-advocate, right? They can help teach someone how to transfer them out of the chair, or don't forget to take off my seatbelt. I went to use a lift the other day to get my client onto the changing table, and I forgot to undo his seatbelt, and I almost folded him in half. It was great. It was one of my better moments. But if he could say, "Don't forget," he would be advocating for himself and making sure that a new caregiver wouldn't make the same mistake. It's important to use those low tech options like the wristbands or the quarterback armband. Does something hurt while we're in a session? Do you need to tell me quickly if we're on the playground that you need something like the bathroom, or you need something like a break? There's other ways that we can do that. So pulling those low or no tech options in are going to help make good success in an ABA session, or something going on in PT. So be creative. It's best to try something and modify what you're doing than to give up. So then, rather than leaving the device in another spot, we might find a way to have it travel with a client down the hallway while they're using their gait trainer. We might, while they're doing a typing task with a keyboard, we might have their device available so that they can say, well, I'm trying to do this, but it's difficult. My rule of thumb is one hard thing at a time, but often what we need to do is, try to modify some of the things in order to get the best outcomes. Moderators, I see some chat numbers. Are there questions yet so far?
There was a request to have this presentation posted to the website after.
I will make it available to the ISS people. I was unable to post it beforehand, so I will make it available, I promise.
And then
anyone else?
Someone just posted a question. Let me try to read through it quickly.
Okay.
I think the wide availability of apps has brought many positive things to the lives of many people. However, do you ever find that the wide availability of apps can sometimes be a negative thing? I've worked with families who bought certain apps based on the recommendations of other parents. Ultimately, some of the clients ended up frustrated with potentially less than optimal solutions. Do you have any thoughts on incorporating app use that is easy to trial and obtain for families, but still stress the importance of involvement of an SLP who is knowledgeable about AAC?
Absolutely. I just had this conversation. I just came from ATIA this last weekend, and we talked about how people are really quick to say, hey, I'm looking for suggestions on what app would be good for my son on a Facebook group. And someone says, well, I like Touch Chat, I like LAMP, I like Speak for Yourself, I like Go Talk Now, whatever they might be. The availability is nice. The price point is also nice because families can just get them. And you do find issues with someone who kind of jumped the shark. They kind of got there too quick. I don't think that's the metaphor I'm looking for. But anyway, they went there too quickly, and then they have this thing that may or may not work well. Again, I always encourage families to communicate with their school team, their private therapy team, their outside group team, whatever team, to make sure that they're problem solving before they sink their money into something. It is a challenge because the availability makes it, you go to the App Store. You don't have to ask for it. You can just have it if you want it. So it is a challenge, but it's something that as a professional, especially on these Facebook groups or whatever, I have reminding myself daily to remember to say, this might be what I like, but make sure you talk to your team. I hope that answers your question a little bit. Okay, moving on. So other rehab professionals, when we see a need, we fill a need. I meant to put a picture of Rodney Copperbottom or Copperpot, whatever his name was from the Robots movie. Because when you see a need, you fill a need. So engineers or PTs or somebody, if you're crafty, how would you build a better mousetrap or slice the bread differently? What do we need to do in order to get our clients access to what it is that they need? We need to be creative in ways to improve access. We need to find ways to bring the tech to the client. There's a ton of different mounting options out there, or switches or different materials. But how do we match exactly what goes along with our user? It's difficult. Like I said, you're in a Papasan chair, access is a bear. If you need 2 switches and you're in a Papasan chair, now what do you do? How are we going to get that access, that tech, to the individual who needs it? So Stella Young, like I said, I was just at ATIA, and my friend Lance put up one of these slides that said, the quote is, "The only disability in life is a bad attitude." And the reason that's stuff is because it's just not true. Because of the social model of disability, no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs have ever made it turn into a ramp, and never. And smiling at a television screen isn't going to make the closed captions appear for people who are deaf. No amount of standing in the middle of a bookshop and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn all those books into Braille. It's just not going to happen. Stella's been a long advocate for disability and abilities around the world. And it's a lot about inspiration porn. Our clients are not inspirational. They're just doing the best they can with what they've got. But it's our jobs to make being a part of society easy and normal and accessible, right? All right, things I know I didn't cover. I didn't go over all the different voice options, and there are many. For our ALS and MS populations, there's voice banking. There's lots of different options for voice banking. There are Android-based options, and because they aren't as numerous, we have the difficulty of matching them as well to the need of our clients. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of mounting and hardware options and solutions. And there's more specifics on equipment for access as far as switches and such. And so with that, I know I didn't cover all of that because they gave me an hour. At ATIA, they gave me a poster. So we had to put a lot of this onto a poster, which was a challenge. The Owling board made it, our drag queens made it onto the poster. But there's a lot of stuff, I've been studying all of these things for over 27 years. And still I'm not the expert. So to know all the options and to seek out new options if we need them, that's key. All right, here's another spot for questions. The picture on the bottom is my friend Sayred's son, Max. He's now, I think, 3. So the picture was so cute, I had to use it. This is where you can reach me. This is my email address. If you'd like to email me, I can get you the slides as well. I will post them to the IIS site before the end of the day so that you have access to this. So if you go back to this session, you'll be able to get access to that. I'll leave it up for just a second. I'm trying to look at my time here. Okay, we still have time. All right, other stuff and things. This is when I get into the fancy, no, I'm kidding. Conferences, if you want to learn more about any of this, ISS is a great conference with the RESNA Track. But on top of that, there's ATIA, things like CSUN, Closing the Gap, AAC in the Cloud, AAC in the Desert. There's probably an AAC in the something anywhere. So don't be afraid to look for ways to learn more about AAC. ISAC, if you become a member of USAC and ISAC, you have access to quarterly webinars that are free that have content regarding AAC around the world. Really great sessions. And always look to your own state and your local conferences to see what's available to you. One of the podcasts I appreciate is Rachel Madel and Chris Bouguet have a podcast called Talking with Tech. They cover a lot of this stuff, and they talk about the points and counterpoints of, this is good and that's good, this is not so good. And they try really hard to bring those issues out and have people talk about them so that we can better understand them and problem solve as a team and collaborate. Okay, this is a bad plug. I do not get paid to do this, but it's a great resource for people who use AAC. And if you work in teams, you might even share this information with your clients. There are people around the world who go from birth to death. You've got everyone, adults and children who and their families who are members. Most of the committees and the positions of leadership in USAC are held by people who use devices. And so there's really great peer interaction. There's great PWU AAC chat Zooms that they do, every couple months. There's ways we're going to be creating a searchable membership list where you can find someone in your area or someone who does what you need in your area or somebody who does what you do and you just want somebody on your team. So there's my really shameless plug. But anyway, I thank you so much. These are some of my clients whom I love dearly, who have agreed to have their pictures in these slides. Chris, Danny, and Elizabeth have been working with me for years, and they're just wonderful people who love being a part of the world. So any more questions? I think, yep, that's the end of my slides. I'll go back to my contact information.
Hey, Beth, it looks like we do have one question from Aaron Rogers here. Do you work with ATPs?
I do. So I volunteer for an organization called TECAN, which is a Kids Equipment Network that it was created by Tim Caruso in the Chicagoland area. And so the suppliers that help us, to fit the equipment to our clients and the ATPs who are there to work for the suppliers, I work with them all the time. And again, we have to make sure that as a team, we come to those decisions together. In order to make the best choices. They know the equipment and we know the clients. So we have to share that information together. Does that answer your question?
He said, yes, thank you. And so
awesome.
There are a couple other comments saying, thank you, this is awesome, thank you. And just really appreciating the presentation overall. I guess
yeah, I think we do have a few more minutes. So, throw some more questions at me if you'd like. I tend to go over, so I went super fast so that I wouldn't do that this time. And I think it bit me. So anybody?
Well, in the interim, I will read off the CU code. I also posted it in the chat already. I'll post it again and read it off just to make sure everybody has it. And then obviously you guys can still post if you'd like to. And Beth can answer those questions for you. So CEU code is NI89XN. Like I said, I'll put it in the chat again.
Beth, I did see another question in the chat.
Fantastic.
At what age do you typically start AAC device trials?
So I, along with my private practice, I also do early intervention. And I have found that it's really tough to get the 2-year-olds and the 1-year-olds in understanding the language that's used or the reason that some tech might be helpful to them. But I do start it as soon as I see the need. And sometimes it's kids who might end up being verbal. I don't know. I don't have that crystal ball. So I started as young as 1, but really what I'm doing is I'm starting to use the technology to model the language before they even touch the devices. I always have apps and core boards in front of me. I have loaner devices. One thing I wanted to mention is if ever you need to have technology to trial, go to every state has a tech act. I don't know what they're all called. Ours is IATP. You can borrow devices for 2 to 4 to 6 weeks, depending on their loan need. But borrow devices, have them available and try them. That's what I do. I make sure that I have access to what I need so that I can model the language and start modeling systems that may or may not be helpful to that client as young as 1. Does that answer your question? I hope.
So we have a couple more comments thanking you. One comment, very informative. I am in the process of taking the ATP exam. which, seeing that comment, I'll make a personal comment on that, is really good to hear, knowing that the ATP exam does cover all AT. So that's really good to hear. And then we have one more question here. Can AAC work with telehealth? Is there translation services?
Okay, so I've got two little bits of information here. The ATP and the exam and the classes and all the stuff, it's a really great way to get some generalized knowledge in AT in general. It's definitely a generalist exam. And I encourage you, if that's the direction in which you want to go, I encourage you to pursue it. But I don't think anybody needs a certification in order to be whatever. You're not going to get paid more or whatever. I myself think the ATP is amazing. So that's why this RESNA track is amazing and fun for me. Yes, when we were on lockdown and we couldn't go out, I did a lot of teletherapy with my clients. There are benefits and risks to teletherapy because now you're forcing the person on the other side to help you be the prompter, to be the person who helps the kids or the individuals move through the tech. And so the benefit to that is the communication partners are forced into using the technology more instead of just sending a kid off to their speech therapy session and say, here you go, you're all done. So teletherapy is very effective as far as getting more of the people involved kind of in the mix. I was able to use the screen mirroring option or the screen share in order to share my screen, so I could prompt with the devices and the emulators on my computer. I have core boards that I post behind me when I'm in my office, and so I can point to a paper board up on the wall that's a poster size. And so it's really easy to use teletherapy. But in the same sense, if you don't have a good connection, if you don't have someone who's able to help very well, being that far away from your client makes it a challenge, but a challenge that's worth trying. Meet that challenge head on and see what you can do. As far as translation services, the difficulty that we have there is if you take an app or you take a program and you take anything, the translation that you can use through Google or through any of the systems, amazing. But what you don't have is always the language match. So you don't have the morphemes, you don't have the parts of speech correct, the verb conjugation, the subject verb agreement. And so you get a direct translation of English to Romanian, but it's not going to, or Arabic or Tamil or whatever the language might be. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that it's going to find you the words, but it's not going to always find you the language when you use the translation. So I see another question or a comment. Yes, it's very exciting to take the exam. I've been in rehab tech for almost 5 years now doing evals. Fantastic. Yes. So go ahead and take that step. See if any certification, training, class, webinar, podcast, any way that you can learn more is important. What we have is, and I know I still have a minute and a half. You want to make sure that we try really hard to recognize our areas of weakness, right? It's hard to know what you don't know, but sometimes some of these issues that we have with AAC, it's a you problem. You didn't learn what the device can do in order to make good choices, as opposed to it being a systemic problem for the client. So what you don't want to do is say, well, it doesn't work, we have to try something else. It could be working. It could be something you don't quite understand. So make sure you reach out and learn as much as you can about your clients and their systems and why those decisions were made. And we'll all be doing a much better job of advocating for our people. And I think I got it right under the wire.
Absolutely. It looks like there is one more question regarding specific apps for the diagnosis of CAS within children. And say, feel free to answer it real quick, or Austin, if you'd like to. She does have her email there if you'd like to ask her directly.
So childhood apraxia of speech and having the difficulty in intelligibility is something that's a challenge, because the words that we typically don't understand are the fringe vocabulary. So if you can find an app and you can teach this verbal child to access a device that gives them access to the words that is robust enough to help them to problem solve, lots of the apps are great for that. It's just a matter of really having enough language in there in order to meet their needs. I use it all the time. So again, you have to know the systems and you have to know your client to know maybe which is the best way to tackle their CAS. Thanks again, you guys. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I was very nervous because I haven't done ISS before.
All right. Thank you very much, Beth.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was a great presentation. I was taking notes the whole time because I have to write a paper. So
Well, good. If you ever need anything, reach out. I'm happy to help. My business is called AAC Helper LLC. So I'd love to help. Oh,
Thank you.
Elisa,
Appreciate it.
I see there's a note from my friend Elisa. Love you too, love. If she can still hear me.